Hello Eden Gardeners, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to show you 3 methods that you can sow seeds that are going to save you time, money, and space in your house and make the whole spring season a whole lot easier. I'm also going to cover all the seeds that you should be planting right now, or that you can start indoors, outdoors, or direct sow right in your garden this week. So without further ado, let's get into it. So at 8 to 10 weeks before your last frost date, you have 3 main planting methods that you can choose. Okay, you've got indoor, which requires lights and warmth and watering and a lot of maintenance. And this can cost a lot of money because the lights, it's the light bill, it's the water, it's the heater, it's all that. But it's also a space in your house. Not everybody has a grow room to dedicate to growing. And so this is one of those types that you might want to reduce as much as possible, which can be a little hard and discouraging when you're in a cold climate like we are. And so I like to optimize how many things I can have indoors, how fast I can get them outdoors. And so planning how many weeks before your last frost date and when you're planting things in that time frame is going to be key. So the garden planner in the description below will help you plan to optimize what you're planting when indoors, so that you can use the smallest amount of space possible and you can plant things outdoors as much as possible and use the grow space that you have outdoors rather than your space indoors. That brings me to the second type of growing method, and that is winter sowing. So you might have seen throughout YouTube, throughout social media, these people using these milk jugs to grow their stuff outdoors. That is winter sowing. It's basically taking a container that can act as a greenhouse of sorts for people who don't have greenhouses. It works very, very well. I've used it a couple times. I use these plastic bottles, and because my dad has to use them for work, and so we have a lot of these lying around, so I use these instead of the milk jugs. I've used soda bottles, the 2-liter soda bottles before. I find those tend to tip over in the wind. They're not as stable, whereas these have this like flat base, which I really, really like. So just keep that in mind. You might have to bury them a little bit more if you have something a little bit taller. You're not going to get as many seedlings or seedling space if they're narrow rather than wide. But these are great, and you can choose bigger containers. You can do smaller containers. It's up to you. So you just take an X-Acto knife and you just cut it around the center. I like these also because they have a ridge, so I can just follow the ridge with the X-Acto knife. And then the second thing you want to do is make sure that there's lots of holes in the base. In previous years, I've done it with scissors, I've done it with screwdrivers, things like that to poke the holes. But this year, I was very lucky, and I have this soldering tool that gets hot and it just melts the plastic. And it is a lifesaver. It goes so fast. Then you close up your container. You can do it with duct tape. Lots of people do it with duct tape. You can just set it in like this and it will hold. It will hold. You don't need tape. Nothing needs to go to a landfill. It'll just sit right in there and the ridges will actually keep it in place. It will work with milk jugs. It'll work with a lot of different things. You just gotta like force it in there and it'll be fine. Major point is that you have to remove the cap. Very important that the cap is off. It has to ventilate. And when you are planting in here, you have to have moist soil to start with and put your seeds, top them off. And then when you set them outside, leave them alone. They'll be fine. Put them in the sun. If you find that they are not condensing anymore and they are a little bit dry, then you want to water them. Otherwise, nature will do it. You will get snow, you'll get rain right in the cap here, and it'll be enough to keep the soil moist and keep the seeds happy and healthy. And when they start to germinate, then you might see that they might need a little bit more, a little bit less water, but it'll do fine. If there's too much water that comes from rain or anything else, it'll go right out the bottom. Don't worry about it. And the third type of sowing that you can do at 8 to 10 weeks, especially the 8 weeks and going closer to your frost date, is direct sowing. If you want it to come along a little bit faster, maybe you're you're a little bit impatient or you want to get a real start on the growing season, you can put a plastic down if you want, like a dark plastic, and it'll warm up the soil a little bit more. You can put a fleece cloth or a row cover over it to keep the frost off and to keep some of the warmth in. You can also put some water bottles filled with water, and they will become heat sinks in the during the day, so they will attract all the solar rays into the water, heat the water, and then they will slowly release all that warmth at night and keep your seedlings happy, keep the soil from being a little bit, it'll keep them being a little bit warmer than, say, if you didn't do it. And that can be all the difference for germination early in the season. If you like this content, please consider subscribing to this channel. It really helps grow this new business of mine. And like the video and comment something that you're going to be growing this spring. I'd love to hear exactly what you're excited about and what kind of plants you're going to be planting. On the screen, you can pause right now. There's a table that shows all the types of seeds that you can be planting right now and the methods in which you can plant them. I'm going to go over them one at a time and give you a little bit of insight. First one, we're going to cover everything that has to be sown indoors. It can't go outdoors, it's too sensitive to cold. The first one is going to be celery. Celery takes a long time, and so it's very important that you get it in as soon as possible. The second one is brassicas. They also take a long time, so it's very important to get those in your trays right now. Another one is going to be leeks and onions. Also take a long time, but they're well worth planting from seed. You get a much bigger harvest, so go ahead and pick up your preferred onions and try some leeks. Next one is anything that is a small seeded herb. Herbs take a long time to grow, especially things like rosemary. You're going to want to plant those now so that you'll have them to go out in a couple weeks. You also want to start any small seeded flowers. This would be your poppies, this would be your wildflower mixes, your cosmos, your snapdragons, anything that you might do in a cut flower garden, or for the pollinators that's going to be an annual plant, or if you have any kind of perennials that you want to seed right now, this is the time to do it. Get them in your seed trays as soon as possible, broadcast sow them in a tray or put them in the cells. Either way, get them in the soil right now. The next one you want to do is cabbages. Cabbage also, like brassicas, so broccolis, cauliflowers, any kind of Brussels sprouts, those all need to be planted indoors in our climate here in Zone 5 because it's just too short of a growing season to get much out of it if you do it outside. You can direct sow them. I don't recommend it. I recommend starting indoors, and you can start them right now. The next one is going to be anything in the Solanaceae family. So you're going to start your peppers, your eggplants, and potentially your tomatoes. So if you have space indoors, you can start your tomatoes. Otherwise, I will remind you in 2 weeks to start your tomatoes then. But your eggplants and your peppers, they take a little bit longer to germinate, and so you're going to want to put them in this week. And the last one that you have to do indoors at this time of year is your tropicals. If you have any kind of tropical plant that you want to be growing as a herb, this is the time to plant them. So things like lemongrass, toothache plant is something I'm doing this year, and I'm also doing hibiscus. Those things, you're going to be planting them right now. Anything that is a small seeded or a plant that just does not belong in our zone or in our climate, this is the time you're going to put it in the soil and get it started indoors so that you can start to harden it off and put it outdoors. Now we can move on to the things that you can winter sow. We just went over the winter sowing method. These are the things that you can start outside in your jugs or in your containers this time of year. The first thing is going to be kale. Kale is extremely cold hardy. It'll even overwinter from the previous year in a mild winter. Mine is doing just fine. There's a little video here of it in my garden. You can harvest it throughout the winter and into the spring. You can direct sow it in the fall, but you can also sow it using the winter sowing method now in your jugs, and it will do just fine. It will germinate in a couple weeks, and you don't need to touch it at all. The next one that you can winter sow is spinach. Spinach is also cold hardy, and we do here in Montreal get really warm summers and sometimes very sporadic springs. So it's very important to get it in very, very early so that you don't miss that cold window that we have in the spring. The best way to do that is to either direct sow it in a couple weeks or to do winter sowing method and get 2 weeks head start on the growing season. The next thing that you can winter sow at this time of year is lettuce. Any kind of lettuce, but especially cold hardy lettuces like butterheads. Butterheads are a really good choice for winter sowing because they are cold hardy. A lot more so than things like romaine. But you can also do rocket, the mesclun mixes, you can do loose leaf lettuces. Any of those can be winter sown right now and they will come up in a couple of weeks. And anything that you can winter sow now or direct sow now, you can also plant indoors. The next thing that you can winter sow is Swiss chard. Swiss chard is a lot more hardy than things like bok choy and pak choy, which are closely related. So you can put any kind of Swiss chard out in winter sowing method now. It will produce all season and it is a wonderful crop for you to grow and to use and to learn to use in your garden. It'll also provide an alternative to spinach during the hot months of the year. Now we can cover the direct sown crops. Believe it or not, you can grow things in the ground right now. It's just started to thaw and at night sometimes it'll freeze over, but there are certain seeds that can handle being direct sown at this time of year. Things like seed potatoes can be put into pots and let to germinate over the next couple of weeks. You can choose any of your types, but I especially encourage you to choose ones like this because you can get new potatoes or you can get a main crop potato from them. The next thing that you can direct sow right now is all your onion sets and your garlic. Those things you can put in as cloves or as onion sets right in the garden, cover them up with some mulch, and they will start to sprout very soon. And the last thing that you can direct sow this week is turnip. And I highly recommend that you try turnip, even if you might not be a fan or you've never tried turnip in the kitchen, because they are a great aphid repellent. So if you have fruit trees or you have any plants that are really getting decimated by aphids during the summer, I recommend that you plant them right at the base and they will deter most of your aphid population from going after your plants. Give it a try and tell me if it works for you. So that's it for this week, guys. Happy planting. See you later.